Welcome to the Take 92 podcast. My name is Sammy Warm Hands. I am your host, and today is part 2 of our annual Top 10 recap. We already covered some hip-hop records. I put this out on Friday morning, and here I am Friday evening recording another one. We cut it in half this time, so we're going to talk about all of my favorite albums from the punk, metal, hardcore, rock community, world, whatever the fuck it is. But first, I fucked up because normally I can look at my shelf because I buy physical media and I can go, these are the albums I bought this year, this is what came out, and I can create my list based on that. And this time, because I am using Spotify now for the first time, I was doing my best to go make a mental inventory of everything that I listened to, but I forgot a few things. So I made a post on my Instagram today that was sort of an addendum that I've already realized several albums that I would have loved to discuss on the podcast and maybe refresh my memory on them before I recorded it. So just as a shout out, some friends of mine, Gradient, Superstition, and Blueprint, as well as Common and Pete Rock, all had really solid releases this year, and I'm going to go back and check them out again. Blueprint had Chamber Music 2, which is a follow-up to his mostly instrumental chamber music that was, I think, like 20 years old at this point, maybe 15. Self-released, weightless project, I believe, one of the earlier ones that he had done when he was still with Rhymesayers. And yeah, it's good stuff. I've got some of his newer beats on my upcoming album coming out next year, actually. And so I don't know if I could give a stronger endorsement to his current production work than that. But there's a couple of vocal tracks on there, Illogic's on there. There's an Orphanage track that's, like Slug, Aesop, Illogic, and Blueprint all rapping together, with a shout out to Idea, really cool. And yeah, good stuff. The one with Superstition is the second EP, I believe, in a series. And we've had him on the show before. And, I'm a big fan of not just his technical ability, but his themes and the content of his rhymes. And, it's talking about grown man stuff, like being a musician, but being a married man for a long time. And it's talking about, responsibilities and aging in this game and, interesting stuff. I'd say if you're curious about that one, just check out the very last track on the EP. It's I was just listening to it today. Let me pull up my phone here and I'll tell you what the title of it was. Superstition. When I first looked, I even checked. I was like, didn't he have something out? And I pull up albums and I see 2023. I'm like, oh, nope. But it's under EPs, so that's why. All That Was Left Unsaid is the name of the EP, and the last song, He Who Remains. So if you want to check out a really good song that's a good example of some of the records I forgot to mention yesterday, He Who Remains by Superstition. That's S-U-P-A Stition. And yeah, really good stuff. But today we are going to talk about my other love, and that is loud, fast guitars and shit like that. So without further bullshit, I want to start out with a recent release. It's only about a month old. Album is called Merciless by Body Count. And Body Count has been revived now. This is the 4th album since Ice-T brought them back. And it's been really strong stuff ever since that first release, Manslaughter, back in, 2015, I want to say, something like that. And their production is super tight. The riffs are great. He's still got like a great command, with his voice. Like, he can cut through anything. He's still got that Ice-T attitude. With this record, again, I think I said I had this reaction to something else yesterday, but I watched a music video clip for, I think it was the title track, Merciless, and I was like, oh man, does this not sound as good or something? And like, well, I'm listening on my busted ass cell phone, no wonder. I was like, man, did they not get Will Putney to do the production again and to mix the record? I'm like, that'd be a shame. And then I kind of forgot about it. And a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh shit, I forgot that came out. I'm going to listen to it. So I'm at work. I put it on my earbuds and first track. And I was just like, oh shit, no, this sounds great. It's heavy as fuck. This is exactly what you would want from Body Count. And, they've got a couple of collaborations like they usually do. Like the Corpse Grinder track is kind of perfect. Like they're doing their take on The Purge, and there's a track with, I think it's Howard from Killswitch Engage on there, and some cool shit. I think the only moment that maybe I didn't really like was they do their own version of Comfortably Numb, and David Gilmour is actually playing on it, but instead of giving him sections to solo, he kind of solos over the whole thing. And, I don't blame him for this, but he's mixed very prominently. And so there's a lot of times where he's just like competing with the vocals for space. And so I wish that, it wasn't like a 5-minute guitar solo and that he was maybe embellishing, because it just sort of feels like he's improvising over their entire performance. But still, solid record. If you're a fan of Body Count, and if you've never checked out Body Count, like, it's a really cool project because it is a metal band. It's not rap metal to me, but it does have moments where Ice-T is being Ice-T and not like, barking on the mic, doing his metal shit. And so I think it fits really well in this series of the last 4 records, since their resurgence. And pretty big fan of it. So check out Body Count, Merciless. That's my number 10. Take a sip of water here. As we get into number 9, it's another one that came to me late. This is an artist that I don't necessarily think of as one of my favorites, and yet I pick up everything that he drops, and I have for probably a decade. I wasn't a big fan of the White Stripes when they came out. I kind of, got into a little bit of their stuff later, but Jack White as a solo artist is really interesting to me. And I love the grooves that he uses. He always has really good drummers playing with him. And I love the big noisy guitars that he uses. And, they're funky tracks, right? And this record was dropped in a very interesting way where I think people had visited his Third Man Records, and which I believe is in Nashville. And he was just like, not him personally, but they were handing out these blank, unmarked vinyl records. And the instruction was to rip the audio and upload it for people to hear. And it turns out it was an unreleased Jack White album, which ended up being released under the name No Name. So I don't know if it's just untitled or if it's actually called No Name, but yeah. And so it didn't come out through proper channels right away, but it did finally come out about later this summer, I believe. And it's fucking solid, man. Like, it's even a little bit punk rock. Like, there's a couple up-tempo tracks on there, like Bombing Out, that, it almost feels like he's going for some of, it's not as fast or anything, but like fast for him. Almost like that early, like, Keith Morris Black Flag shit or something like that. It's like really raw and I don't know. It's cool shit. It's cool shit. I don't have a lot to say because I haven't got to know this one super well yet, but I listened to it 3 more times this week and really, really solid. I pretty much dig everything this guy drops, and this record is no exception. I would say that compared to some of the other ones, this does have more of a raw production. I think he dropped last time was like a rock album and then an acoustic one, and before that it was a rock album that had these big bombastic parts, but it also had like a real, like I said, kind of a funky groove element throughout. And this one is more just like a balls out rock record, and I really like his lyrics too. I think it's got some really cool just interesting songwriting all around. So I don't have a lot of detail on that. Go check it out for yourselves. It's Jack White, No Name. And next on the list is number 8. And I think this is pretty much a perfect album. I would say there's not really anything that I would change about it. And I'm only putting it at number 8 because there are styles of metal and hardcore that I might like more, and yet I've listened to this band for 20 plus years, and this to me feels like one of their best releases to date. This is Darkest Hour, and the album is called Perpetual Terminal, and it's like perpetual / terminal, and this is an incredibly well-produced, great-sounding record that, they kind of came from that metalcore scene, but to me, they've got this, they got this, like, punk and thrash influence that's in there that keeps the tempos up. I love John's voice. He's got this. A lot of times with metal, they do this kind of, throaty sound effect scream that doesn't really feel like it's got any air behind it. It doesn't have the passion that a lot of like hardcore punk has when it's screaming. And John has always had this great middle ground that has the nasty, saturation of a distorted metal scream, and I don't mean like a filtered distortion effect or something, but the way he does it, but also has this anger behind it that you can really feel. And there's great guitar work on this record, great production, and really powerful vocals. I can't really pick out any specific examples, but if you're into metal at all, I would give this a shot. If you're into, fast, heavy shit at all, it came out almost a year ago now, all the way in February. But yeah, this is one that I put on my list. I definitely want to get a hard copy of it, but I've still spent a decent amount of time with it just listening at work, and I highly recommend Perpetual Terminal from Darkest Hour. Now, at number 7, this is one of my favorite bands, and we've talked a lot about them in the past. Even last year, they were on my list, I believe at a bit of a lower ranking. This is the Smashing Pumpkins. And, they've pretty much been, in terms of active bands, like my second favorite band, just behind Metallica, for a long, long time, because Melancholy has, been pretty much my favorite album ever. And these guys are in a really prolific era. Billy has been writing his ass off in recent years, really the last decade. And last year, they had dropped this 33 song triple disc album. And it had its moments, it was a little bit hit or miss for me. And so when they dropped a surprise album this year, I was curious because the last one had a lot of build up to it, and there was a podcast about every single song, and it was this whole fucking thing. It was going to be a sequel to Melancholy and Machina, and there's a lot of build up, right? And this one just kind of appeared, and so I checked it out, and 10 songs, not 33, and the one before that was 20 as well. So like a 10-song album already. Okay, I'm interested. It's focused, to the point. And putting it on, this is a straight up rock record from the Pumpkins. This is the kind of guitar playing that I most love from this band. And I would consider Billy Corgan one of my biggest guitar influences, even if I don't necessarily play like him. There's bits of his chord changes, his note choices, the bends and slides that he uses, certain things that he does. Those fingerprints are all over my playing, even if it's in DFS and we're playing fast hardcore or something like that. Like, this is the kind of shit that I really like from the band. I would kind of compare it to Zeitgeist, which I know is a divisive album, but for me, that was a really great comeback. It's, probably in my top 3 Pumpkins albums. And the reason I compare it to that, and maybe to Zwan as well, those are side projects in the early 2000s, because both of those are guitar-driven, heavy albums. I say more so Zeitgeist and this one. Heavy guitar albums with melodic vocals, right? Like, we've never gone back, since they reunited in 06, 07, we've never gone back really to Billy's aggressive, snarly, raspy voice from Machina and Melancholy and the tours in those eras and Adore era and all that stuff. So this is, to me, about the best thing I could hope for. And my favorite tracks on the last record, Autumn, were primarily the heavy guitar-driven songs. And I believe I talked about how Jimmy's drums sounded big and powerful on that album, and yet there were something to be desired from those guitar tracks at times. It sounded like maybe they were recording direct, using amp modelers or something. It just didn't quite have the power behind it that a lot of his records and live rigs have. And that's not a problem on this album. It's very well produced. I'm really happy with the sound of it and it being a big, ballsy guitar record, pretty much start to finish. It's obviously it's a dynamic album, but like, it sounds great and it's just heavy shit. And I'm happy with it. So I would check it out. It's got the weirdest fucking title. I've already talked about his proclivity for weird titles, but it's called Agori Mori Me, which is spelled Aghori, Agori, Mhori, Mori, Mei, May. Jesus Christ, Billy. I don't know why. But title aside, I finally got my hard copy for Christmas the other day, and I was like, oh shit, wow. Like, yeah, I forgot I put this on my list, and I listened to it, I think, 3 times that first day. I was like, oh yeah, this is great, man. I'm really, really into this record. So check it out if you want just some good, heavy riffs. If you're a fan of classic Pumpkins and you haven't really kept up on their new stuff, I think it can be a little bit daunting to get back into them, but this is a great place to start because to me, it's familiar territory, but it's really good. It's just a really solid release front to back. So check out Agori Mori Me from the Smashing Pumpkins. Take another sip of my water here. All right, at number 6, it's another one of my all-time favorite bands, maybe a top 5 band for me, that was one of my biggest influences when I began playing music and learning the guitar. And this is Green Day. And it came out the very beginning of the year, like January. So it might have been forgotten on some people's end of the year lists. I've seen it on some others, but this is a solid release from a band who has fallen off a couple times in their career, and that's due to longevity, experimentation, and a lot of things that I respect them for. And the last record was the first one I didn't even buy. It was called Father of All Motherfuckers, and the artwork was like a shitty, like a 12-year-old recreated the American Idiot cover and like drew shit on it. It was very strange. And the style was like fucking out there. Like I like their other shit like Foxborough Hot Tubs, and I like the trilogy Uno Dos Tre. I liked Warning. I like a lot of their stuff that the purists or whatever would not have. But that record was just like, I thought, oh, this is a joke because they had one more album in their contract, and they're just sure, we'll just crap out a record and we'll put the worst songs in the worst album cover. And it was like 8 tracks or something. It was really short. I was like, wow, yeah, they just half-assed this. They didn't give a fuck. And I'm not sure that's the case because they toured on it and they played those fucking songs on TV. And I was like, good God. But here they are. They came back with Saviors, and it got a lot of praise. And I think that maybe I felt it was a little bit overblown, but I think it's a really strong record. It starts out with, I would say, modern classic Green Day, like sounds like American Idiot, Know Your Enemy, that style of a song, and it's called The American Dream Is Killing Me. And it goes into Look Ma, No Brains, which is more of like an evergreen, timeless Green Day song, 3-chord, up-tempo, pop-punk, really good stuff. And there's tracks like that throughout the record, like Coma City is a good example of it. I think Strange Days Are Here to Stay might be a good example of that. Forgive me if I'm not connecting all of the titles to the songs in my brain right now, but there's a lot of like classic Green Day that you would expect, and then there's also some new sounds that they haven't quite done before. And so Dilemma was a single, where he's singing, and I was sober, now I'm drunk again. But he's like doing this sort of bellowing thing with his voice where it's a little different than his usual vocal style. And then Bobby Sox came out, I believe, after that. And it's the one where he's just shouting, do you want to be my boyfriend? Do you want to be my girlfriend? And it's like, it's in your face, and it repeats a lot of times throughout the song. It's almost a 4-minute song of that. And it's a cool song, and I like it. But what's happening here is I feel like this album doesn't quite have its identity. It's 15 songs, and it sort of vacillates between these recognizable Green Day songs and styles, I should say, and then these new sort of more rock and roll tracks. And, if you listen to like Father to a Son or something, that's a great Green Day ballad type song. There's stuff on here that perfectly fits what you would think, but then there's a good chunk of it that challenges you. And I like both styles, though I feel like you get a little bit of like, okay, here's 2 or 3 tracks that like sound like this, and then here's 2 or 3 tracks that sound like that. And it sort of just goes back and forth as you listen to it. So it's maybe not the most consistent listen, but I think all the songs are good. I mean, I listened to like, I think it's Corvette City or something like that, or Corvette Summer, where it's like, really straightforward 70s rock and roll cliche lyrics. So I'm like, okay, guys, come on. But I get that, it's sort of an homage to their other influences. And so, again, I don't fault these guys. I respect them always pushing themselves, trying new things, challenging the audience's expectations. And I think it's a very good late stage record from a band like this, to still be excited enough to try these things is very cool. Because if they had an album like Father of All Motherfuckers, they could have easily been like, okay, guys, we need to do a very familiar, fucking recognizable thing when we come out next time. We need to go back to basics, back to formula, right? You know, they kind of had their saint anger with that one. And they didn't quite do that. Again, they opened with a couple songs like that, but even in terms of the major singles that were pushed from this record, a lot of them are this new kind of different thing. So I would say check it out, you know. Even pick a song at random. Like, put on Living in the 20s. Like, there's just good shit throughout. And look up the music videos, you know. They're interesting. I wouldn't have necessarily made all the same choices, but that's what makes it fun to watch in the progression of a veteran artist who's been around a long time. Smashing Pumpkins always going to give you a different album than last time. Green Day usually going to give you a different album than last time. I'd say the last record of theirs that I truly loved was Revolution Radio. It was like 2016, I think. But it's really cool to see them feeling confident and deliver a really strong record. I wish that I would have got to catch their tour this summer, because it was actually both of those bands together. It was Rancid, Pumpkins, and then Green Day headlining, playing Dookie in full, and then American Idiot in full, and then encore songs, which included the new stuff. And I thought, man, that would have been great. But, you know, I went to a lot of shows this year, and you can't afford to see them all. So that is Saviors from Green Day at number 6. Okay, next. Believe we're in the top 5. And it's a band I've talked about on the top 10s before. I was actually going to have the bass player, Colin McCaslin, from this show. Was one of the last guests that I spoke about getting for the podcast before I kind of stopped doing seasons of the show. But this is Sum 41. They had announced their final album would be a double album, Heaven and Hell. And there's the Heaven disc, which is their classic pop-punk style, and the Hell disc, which is their heavier metal-influenced stuff. And I'm a fan of both. And so I thought that was a really cool idea and a good way to send off the band. You know, it's 20 songs, but it's cut in half. You know, I'm sure some fans would gravitate towards one side or the other, you know, whichever era they love the most. I did catch them on this tour, and this band, Many Eyes, was opening, and it was a really, really good show. The Interrupters were the middle band, and I caught it after a Comic-Con that I went to in Portland, and I just walked around the corner right into the venue, and was that on my birthday? No, it was a birthday present. That's what it was. And, man, it was a great time. They were so fucking good live, and I never actually got to see them, so catching their farewell tour was a goal of mine. And this record is really solid. I think that I may have mentioned before, but Derek Whibley's engineering, you know, he's produced their records for a long time now, the singer and guitarist here, but his engineering has gotten so fucking good that, like, they have worked with the biggest mix engineers in the world, and yet in rock music, certainly. And yet, if you compare his mixes, especially on this record, to those ones, like, oh my God, he's crushing it. He's crushing the competition. Excellent work on this job, or on this record sonically. It's really impressive, and surprisingly, because, you know, I don't even own. I got into this band on Half Hour of Power and All Killer No Filler, which is, you know, the pop punk stuff. And I don't even own those records anymore. You know, the stuff that I really loved from them, the most, I should say, because I did enjoy it all, but was when they started incorporating some of those thrash metal influences. You know, I'm a huge fan of Metallica, and they would bring in these little homages, whether it's a, you know, chuggy fast riff here and there, or like a ripping solo that Dave would do. Like, there was a lot of little moments like that I fucking loved. And when they got I think they took a break when Derek had like a near-death experience or something, and he came back and dropped 13 Voices, and I was like, oh, you're on that heavy shit. That's pretty cool. And I was a fan of it. I liked their kind of drop D heavy riff, almost like some of the Pumpkins guitar playing I was talking about. But I like that side of them a lot. And so what surprised me about this record is the Heaven side, the Heaven disc, is stronger. I think, you know, they released Dopamine as a single, and I was like, okay, this song's a little saccharine, you know, like whatever. I think Landmines was a single. That's a really good song. But I'm listening to it going, oh, God, this is great. And it's not like they strictly stopped blending their influences and styles. It was just sort of like roughly, you know, okay, these songs could fit best over here. These ones could fit best over there. But that first disc is really fucking good. And I think it's the best stuff in this double album. The Hell side, for some reason, I think they're tuning lower, but I believe they're using different amp rigs or something, because the guitars don't quite have that really nice presence on the top end that they have in the first half. And there's also an intro and a cover song. So both discs are 10 tracks, right? But this one has an intro track and a Rolling Stones cover of Paint It Black, which we've heard so many people cover Paint It Black. Is that necessary? No. Like, I have the CD of this, but when I'm listening to it at work and I have it on Spotify, I have it to automatically skip the cover, because to me it just like kind of ruins the flow of the album. And it's 18 songs in, you know, like I don't need this. But there's still 8 good songs on this Hell disc. It just feels a little bit like they had to pad it to get to 10. And I think that's the only place in which this album suffers. Is it's very strong front to back, both sides well represented. Every era of the band is on display. You know, Frank, their drummer, is amazing. You know, the guitars are fucking huge and ripping solos and everything you would want from this band. But it's a little bit front-loaded, you know, because you got a couple filler tracks in the back. So I almost think this would have been better as like a 16 or 18 track album that's all integrated, because it seems like they had this idea of, oh, well, what, we've got a lot of songs, like what if we separate and do half and half, Heaven and Hell? Like, oh yeah, and I like the idea, I get it, but now you wind up with one side that's a little better than the other. But I think this is a very strong record, and I've listened to it quite a bit. Again, sounds incredible. If you haven't heard it, you know, look up the song Rise Up. That's a really good track from the second disc. You know, if you're into the pop punk stuff, check out Landmines. You know, they got videos out. But it's a really good album, and it's a fitting goodbye to this band. All right, so next up, geez, we're cruising through the top 5. This is number 4, and this is a spin-off of one of my favorite bands. I'm going to leave you in suspense and take a sip. Jim Lindberg from Pennywise has a side project, and Pennywise is a really important band to me. I got to see them this year at the NoFX farewell tour, and it was funny, I was more excited to see Pennywise again than to see NoFX, because Pennywise, you know, for as much as Fletcher can be a drunken maniac, their set is always tight, you know, and they give a shit more than NoFX does when they're performing. And their set was so good. And so when I saw Paul Miner post that he had produced a side project with Jim Lindberg called The Black Pacific, I was like, oh, fuck yeah. And I didn't realize that there was already a Black Pacific record out a while back. But Jim's got this side project. I don't know if it's really a band or if it's just he brings in people to play on the songs he writes. But this is almost straight up a Pennywise record. Like, it's crazy to me that when he left the band, they put out an album with Zoli from Ignite in like 2011, 12, something like that. It's called All or Nothing. And, Fletcher is stepping up as the songwriter, and it sounds very fucking Pennywise. It's a great album. And I know they don't really play anything off it because that's the era where Jim wasn't around. Maybe it's a little sore subject. I don't know. But I thought that was a great record. And it's like, wow, it shows how much Fletcher's bringing to the table. I feel the exact same way about this record. It's called Here Comes Our Wave. And I listened to the first song, I Think I'm Paranoid. I'm like, dude, this could have come off of, what's it called? Reason to Believe, I think. Their 2008 album. Could have come off their last album. Never Say Die, I think was the name of it, a few years back. Like, this is just classic Pennywise shit. And Paul's production, Paul's one of my favorite producers. He's worked with my band a lot, and it's a perfect fit. Pennywise works a lot with Cameron Webb, and he uses a real thick guitar, muscular, pounding drum sort of sound for them that I think is superior to a lot of their, late 90s stuff. And Paul also has similar characteristics in his style that that I think work really, really well. And so you're getting sort of a sister sound in the production style that very much fits Pennywise. You're getting their frontman and a lot of the riffs that you would expect from a Pennywise record. And then in the middle, he shakes it up a little bit. He pushes a little bit in this direction, a little bit in that. And, you can see why it wasn't just a Pennywise record, because he has some different stuff going on in there that isn't quite as, and I don't mean this in a derisive way, but formulaic. Like Pennywise has their sound and they kind of stick to it. If you listen to like Bad Religion or something, they've been a little more prone to experiment over the years. And for better or worse, Pennywise is always giving you what you want. And they have an amazing discography of just banger after banger. And this record is that, but with a little bit something new. And so I've really enjoyed it. From what I've seen, there's not a CD release of it. I would love to get one, but I believe it is on vinyl. So if you're a vinyl collector, check it out. Really solid record, front to back. And yeah, this is one of my favorite punk rock albums of the year. So check out the Black Pacific. Here Comes Our Wave. All right. At number 3, Homestretch. This is the product of a breakup. Sometimes when those bands that you love, something goes wrong and they break up and you never hear from them again, or it just isn't the same the next time. And when Every Time I Die broke up, I was pretty bummed by that, because that's a band that maybe, I don't know, maybe you'd get it. Maybe you'd get it in stuff I play. They're a little more of like, they got that Wilhelm scream chaos in their guitar playing and their arrangements right, but they've got the fast, aggressive energy that I really connect with Dead Fucking Serious and the stuff that I write. And so I really like Every Time I Die, and I really like their lyrics too. And when Keith Buckley, the singer, came out with a new band, Many Eyes, I was interested, but a little bit skeptical. Like, okay, well, we'll see what this is. And the first track that they released, I was like, oh my God, this sounds just like he picked up where he left off with Every Time I Die. And I know that obviously different people are going to have different feelings on it, but this absolutely satiated my desire for more music from them. So Many Eyes, the album is called The Light Age, and I was already I had them on my radar, from the single, and then they were opening the Sum 41 show, and it was the day that this album came out. So I went to the merch booth, and it's so rare these days that you go to the merch table, especially at a big show, and they're actually selling music. It's all fucking clothes. And so I went to the merch table between acts. It was one of the rare times I actually had a seat and I could leave and not lose my spot. And I went to the merch table. They actually had the CD. I bought it, and I listened to that shit so many times. Like, I listened to it on the drive back to my friend Chris's place where I was staying. I listened to it, 2 or 3 times the next day on my drive back from Portland to Eugene. And I fucking love this record. And I talked to, I believe it's the touring drummer of the band. I can't remember exactly, but I was talking to one of the band members about, like, dude, this is a crazy record. But I asked him about the sequencing, and it starts out with like the really hardcore shit, and there's a couple of songs throughout that are more melodic. They're a little bit slower, not quite as balls out, because these songs get fucking intense. Like, this is real in your face hardcore, and I fucking love it. Keith Buckley is one of my favorite hardcore vocalists, just behind my all times, with Lou and Ephraim. And, if anybody out there hears this, I want Keith Buckley on my next record. So, hey, hook it up, put the word out. But man, amazing voice. And then you go into track 2, and it slows down and goes into the melodic stuff. And I was like, why did you guys throw that in so early? Because it seems like you would naturally build. You would have more of like an arc to the record. Like, to me, Mystic Chord, which is track 3, makes way more sense as track 2. And then track 4 is called Third, which an obvious, track 2, right? And so I'm remembering as I'm driving back from Portland the day after this show, and I'm listening to it the third time, and I'm like, okay, God, every song is so fucking good. But if I just move this here, and I was like, well, could you even do that? I don't know, because there's only 10 songs. So there's only so many combinations that you could have with the same opening and same closing songs, right? And so I remember just sort of racking my brain over, like, how could I prolong that moment where you get this other side of the band to come out, right? Because to me, if 7 out of 10 songs are just balls out screaming, then I want 2 or 3 of those in the beginning, so have some momentum. I feel like loses just a little bit of momentum going into Future Proof. And so I was talking to one of the guys from the band, and he's like, oh, well, Future Proof was one of the singles, and, it was kind of doing surprisingly well. And so we were like, well, that's a song that everybody knows. We should put it up, towards the start of the album. And that's something that's weird to me, but I understand it because I am not at all commercially successful with my albums. And so all I'm thinking about is the music itself. I'm never considering what anyone else is going to think or anything like that. But once in a while, I'll listen to an album and I'll be like, weird, why did they bury this awesome song in the back half? You'd think you'd want to grab people with the sing-along kind of track. So I get why they would choose to do that here, even if it kind of ruffles my punk rock hardcore feathers that want just the balls out shit. Because, if I'm listening to a hardcore band, I'm not listening for your melodic tracks. I don't care about your singing for the most part, if I'm honest. But every track on this record fucking rules. So I, again, highly recommend it. It's all the way up in my top 3. This is a really, really strong record. If you're a fan of hardcore, if you're a fan of Every Time I Die, please do yourself a favor and check out Many Eyes and let me know what you think about the sequencing, because I know I'm nerdier than most when it comes to how you put songs together, how they flow together from key and tempo and dynamics and all of these things. And so maybe it hits you in a better way than it does me. But yeah, check out this album. Look up the song Mystic Chord. Look up the song Enough. Speechless. I mean, fuck, you can't go wrong with this record. It's really good. So check out Many Eyes, The Light Age. Okay, now we are at number fucking 2. Take a sip of water. Okay. This is an artist that I don't think I've talked about on the show. I don't know the last time that Slayer put out an album. When did Repentless come out? Was that like 10 years ago? It was quite a while ago. Maybe it was 2017 or something. I don't know. But the older I get, I notice a lot of people, their musical tastes, when they grew up in the hardcore scene, the punk scene, their musical tastes mellow. And mine has gone the opposite way. I listen to a lot more metal than I ever did before, and yet I'm more content. I feel like I'm happier in my life these days, and yet my music is faster and gnarlier. And so in recent years, I went from having a few Slayer albums and being like kind of a casual, I'd listen to them sometimes, to like, there are days where I'll listen to nothing but Slayer. It just fucking hits the spot, man. The tempos, the screaming, like the fucking, you know, when I was younger, being super into Metallica, I would like, oh, Slayer, yeah, I'll check that out, you know, and it's like, well, I don't really care that much about like a solo that's just a fast bunch of notes. It didn't even sound like they were necessarily playing solos in key to me. It's just like versus like the classic Metallica albums had, you know, this more of a push and a pull, you know, and there'd be melodic, catchy parts to the solo, and then the little quick shreddy run, and you know, there was more of like an arc to the solo. And so I'd listen to these guys and I'd be like, yeah, this I don't quite get it, you know. And some of the slower riffs, the classic like no 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 no, you know, it's like, yeah, okay. But then when they got real fucking fast and they did that record of punk rock covers, that was like what hooked me, right? And in recent years, especially this past year, I've listened to probably more Slayer than any other time in my life. And the band broke up a few years back. Of course, they've reunited already, but they broke up a few years back, and guitarist and primary songwriter, in the wake of Jeff Hanneman's passing, Kerry King has a new band with Slayer drummer Paul Bostaph, and it's just called Kerry King. So you've got half the band, including one of them who wrote damn near everything on the last couple records from Slayer, and they have the singer of Death Angel on vocals, which is bringing that like hardcore screamy element to it. And I'm like, this fucking rules. This is straight up thrash, and I could not get enough of it. I just came across this one recently. I listened to it once. I think I had barely like, you know, the $12 on my credit card or whatever, and I ordered a copy of it right away. I just love this shit. So check out From Hell I Rise by Kerry King, and, you know, look up a song like Where I Reign, or Everything I Hate About You. That's a short like punk song kind of. And yeah, this is like everything Slayer does in a very well executed, well written, well produced package. And the interesting thing, because I mentioned like when I was young and I hear Slayer, I'm like, I don't know if I get it because, you know, the guitar playing. But Kerry is actually writing the songs, but he has this other guitar player, Phil, from Machine Head, playing the leads. And so, and I don't know if it's exclusively, I imagine Kerry plays some solos, but what happens is you get some more, I dare to say, creative lead guitar parts that are not just the, you know, mash all the buttons on your video game controller style, for lack of a better term. But, it always seemed like they kind of just played like super fast, almost chromatic, just like as fast and noisy as they could. And Phil is doing some pretty interesting stuff, and then will still give you those noisy little thrash runs that you want from a Slayer record. And so, yeah, I think it's a really interesting combination of all their things, and it really just feels like the next Slayer album. And to me, it's better than Repentless, like the last one they actually did with him, or with Slayer. And it's fantastic. I mean, Paul's drumming is awesome on this record. I think that, Dave Lombardo is obviously the OG, and he's the most influential, but I mean, Paul is on some classic albums himself, and he writes some really interesting parts. And not just that, but his drums sound fucking huge on this album. I don't know this producer, Josh Wilbur, but his work sounds phenomenal on this. So I'm going to try. I'm really fucking broke right now, guys. Like my job cut all of our hours back since September. And so I am like 25-30% light on all of my checks the last few months. But I'm hoping that I can catch the tour, because not only is it Kerry King, but it's Municipal Waste, which is another great thrash band I think I've talked about on this show. And they're touring together, and they're coming through Portland in January. So I'm really hoping I can catch that show, because I've never seen Slayer. I've never seen Municipal Waste. And who knows, being at a smaller venue, maybe I can get my new album signed from Kerry and Paul. That'd be awesome. So check it out if you're a fan of thrash, if you're a fan of fast hardcore. Like, this is great. From Hell I Rise. I wouldn't go to it looking for any lyrical messages. I will say that, because, you might be thinking to yourself, like, why is the big, like, pacifist anti-violence guy so into Slayer and Kerry King? Sometimes you just listen for the attitude, you listen for the energy and the music, and, this is definitely one of those records. I'm not always on board with the death dismemberment themes or whatever that he writes about, but god damn is he writes some great riffs, and it's a really solid band. So check out From Hell I Rise by Kerry King. And here we are, guys, number 1 on my top 10 punk and metal albums of 2024. This is another guest of the podcast, and I got to see them this summer, which was cool, because before I'd only seen them on a big stage at a festival, and to see a little club show, little punk club in my hometown, was a way cooler experience. And this is a band from Fat Records. This is their 3rd album. It's called Obscene Daydreams. The band is called The Last Gang. We had Brenna Red, the singer, on the show a long time ago, and we stayed in touch a bit. I actually met her husband on that Zoom call, and we stayed in touch as well, talking about comic books and shit. But I've watched this band since the first album grow. It was her and Sean and a different drummer in the beginning, and then grow to a 3-piece with their second record. Or I'm sorry, grow to a 4-piece with the second record, adding Ken as a second guitarist. And then with this new record, adding their drummer Sam, who is not me. But surprisingly, when I met him at the show, he's like, oh, hey, I know who you are. Like, I'm a friend of Mike Cambra, who was also a guest of the podcast, who played on our record. And he's like, oh, yeah, I heard that record you did. And so I was like, oh, shit, that's awesome. I'm listening to you, you're listening to me. Fuck yeah, great. But I've watched this band grow from when I talked about their first album. I was like, man, I am very curious what their next album is going to sound like, because they sort of wrapped a bunch of different influences together into one album. And I say into one album because not necessarily into one song, right? You could talk about a band like Pears or something or Sublime or something. There's a lot of different bands that sort of have this amalgamation of different influences in the songs. But I felt like The Last Gang, it was like they would do a song that was kind of this style, and they would do a song that's kind of that style. And I was like, okay, I like all of these, but I'm curious to see where this goes. And the second album, Noise, 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 was really, really strong. And that was definitely on my top albums of the year in 2021, if you want to go back and listen to that. Really, really strong record. But they had some co-writing from Fat Mike and Yotam Ben-Horon, who I believe I mentioned earlier. On yesterday's episode. And very, very good contributions, but recognizable as well. And they make their records with Cameron Webb. I hope I said Cameron Webb earlier and not Cameron Stewart, because I just did a comic book episode on my Batman podcast talking about Cameron Stewart, the author. But Cameron Webb, the producer, also did the Last Gang albums. And to hear their evolution to this one, Obscene Daydreams, which to the best of my knowledge, they didn't have any co-writing on this one. And this feels like a confident fucking band that has truly found their sound and is firing on all fucking cylinders. I can't recommend this enough if you're a fan of melodic punk that has a little bit of an edge to it. She's got this brilliant rasp in her voice that I think, she's one of the best punk singers doing it today. And this album showcases that in every fucking track, man. It starts off great with Electric Avenue. I think if I want to pick out a song, put on Berlin to Rome. And this song threw me off at first because there's this like fucking 3-4 second, like, I don't know if it's samples or what at the very beginning that I'm like, what? That doesn't sound like anything on this album. Threw me off for a second, but the song is fucking great. And man, like I find myself singing along to this unashamed when I'm at work. Like I got my headphones in and I would just be like, I'm a bad bitch feeling feminine. Like I cannot get enough of this record, and every fucking song is a banger. Like if you listen to, I think it's Dogmatic Capitalizer, it's a little more like fast and hardcore influence. Sean's got some absolutely killer like screams. He's the bass player doing like backup screams, echoing what Brenna's saying. And the only complaint I have on the whole record, I think, aside from that little like 3-second intro on the other song, is that I think it's the chorus of this song, Dogmatic Capitalizer, where there's an echo, there's a call and response, right? Where Brenna's going, I can't remember the exact lyrics, but it was playing like, we've been played, it's a fixed game. And Sean's doing the echo as more of like a shouty, screamy thing. But instead of doing the awesome screamy thing he was doing in the verse, it's just like riding this note. And when you're mimicking the cadence without changing any notes along with it, it feels a little weird. So like, it's a fixed game, we've been played. It's just like a little bit underwhelming to me. So I wish they give a little bit of fire in that fucking line. But like, man, overall, this is an incredible album. Great fucking lyrics, like well-written melodies, lyrics, riffs, fucking songs. Sam's drumming is awesome. This is my favorite drumming on any of their records. Cameron's killing it on the production, just like top to bottom. This is a great record. It ends with a nice kind of self-reflective piece years from now. And yeah, this was my Christmas gift to my mom this week, because I always introduce my family to new music, and my mom liked the last album, Noise, Noise, Noise. She came, my parents came, my whole family came to come see them live this summer when they played here in town, and the record wasn't quite out yet. It was like 2-3 weeks away or something, and so I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna going to pick up that album, and if I like it, I'm going to get one for her too. So she was stoked to get that. I'm stoked to have it, and I hope that you guys check it out. You're here listening all the way through an hour into my punk and hardcore recommendations here, so I hope that you check it out. The Last Gang, Obscene Daydreams. These guys are absolutely wonderful, and can't say enough good things about it, so I'll shut the fuck up and let you go look it up. All right, so that is our show. We have a top 10 going from number 10, Body Count, number 9, Jack White, number 8, Darkest Hour, number 7, The Smashing Pumpkins, number 6, Green Day, number 5, Sum 41, number 4, The Black Pacific, number 3, Many Eyes, number 2, Kerry King, and number 1, the motherfucking champs, The Last Gang. All right? Thank you guys for listening to the show. As I mentioned, we're rolling into 2025, which will be the 10-year anniversary of the podcast. I do not have any plans to bring back the show, but I am grateful for you guys who encourage me to keep doing these year-end recaps. And, you know, when I drop the new DFS record and my next rap record, maybe I'll come back and do a little teaser, a deep dive on the songs with you guys, and we'll take it from there.